Betrayed by those he loved, sold into slavery, and imprisoned unjustly, Joseph's life was a storm of pain. Yet, he found the strength to forgive. How? What secret did he hold that allowed him to let go of such deep hurt? Could you forgive if you were in his place? This 21-part series dives into the biblical story of Joseph, unraveling timeless truths about forgiveness, faith, and the human spirit. Prepare to be moved, challenged, and inspired as we explore I've Been Hurt Too Much, How to Truly Forgive. Join us. Your heart may never be the same. In the sun-scorched land of Canaan, where rolling hills met endless skies, a young man named Joseph lived among a family teetering on the edge of ruin. He was the son of Jacob, a patriarch blessed with 12 sons, but it was Joseph who held his father's heart. Clad in a vibrant, multicolored coat, a gift from Jacob, Joseph stood out like a star against the night. His brothers, weathered by toil and hardened by their father's favoritism, watched him with eyes narrowed by resentment. The air in their tents was thick with unspoken bitterness, a family divided by love unevenly given. Joseph was no ordinary boy. At 17, he dreamed dreams that shimmered with divine promise. One night, as the stars glittered above, he saw sheaves of wheat bowing to his own in a golden field. Another time, the sun, moon, and 11 stars knelt before him in celestial reverence. These weren't mere fantasies. They pulsed with meaning, a whisper from God himself. Naive and bold, Joseph shared them with his brothers, his voice bright with wonder. "I saw you all bowing to me," he said, eyes gleaming. Their faces darkened. To them, these dreams were an insult, a taunt from a pampered dreamer who dared to rise above them. The brothers' jealousy festered like an untended wound. Reuben, the eldest, clenched his fists, torn between duty and rage. Judah, sharp-tongued and cunning, muttered curses under his breath. They were shepherds, men of the earth, while Joseph seemed destined for something greater, a destiny they couldn't stomach. Jacob, listening to his son's visions, pondered them in silence, his weathered face etched with both pride and unease. Did he sense the storm brewing? Did he know the cost of these dreams? Beyond the camp, the wind whispered through the olive trees, carrying the scent of destiny and danger. Joseph, oblivious to the gathering shadows, walked among his brothers, his coat a banner of his father's love and their hatred. The dreams had planted a seed, one that would grow into a tale of betrayal, suffering, and, ultimately, forgiveness. But that was far off. For now, Joseph stood at the edge of a precipice, unaware of the hands poised to push him over. What happens when dreams ignite envy instead of hope? How does a family fracture under the weight of jealousy? Stay with us to see how Joseph's journey begins to unravel in ways he could never have foreseen. The sun beat down on the plains of Dothan, where Joseph's brothers tended their father's flocks. Dust clung to their sandals, and sweat streaked their faces as they worked in silence, their resentment simmering beneath the surface. Miles away, Joseph approached, sent by Jacob to check on them. His multicolored coat flashed in the distance, a beacon of everything they despised. "Here comes the dreamer," Simeon snarled, his voice dripping with venom. The others turned, their eyes glinting with a shared, unspoken thought. As Joseph drew near, his cheerful greeting was met with cold stares. He didn't see the storm brewing in their hearts. Reuben shifted uneasily, sensing the danger, but the others were already conspiring. Judah spat into the dirt. "Let's be rid of him," he said, low and fierce. "Those dreams of his, bowing to him. I'd sooner bow to a goat." Laughter, bitter and jagged, rippled through the group. But their words weren't empty. A plan took shape, fueled by years of pent-up rage. They seized Joseph, his coat tearing in their rough hands. His pleas, "What are you doing? I'm your brother," fell on deaf ears. They dragged him to a dry cistern, a gaping pit in the earth, its walls rough and unforgiving. "Into the hole with the dreamer," Levi growled, shoving him down. Joseph landed hard, the darkness swallowing him. Above, his brothers dusted off their hands, their faces a mix of triumph and unease. Reuben, torn, stepped away, muttering about sparing his life. "We'll decide later," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then, a caravan appeared on the horizon, traders bound for Egypt. their camels laden with spices and myrrh. Judah's eyes narrowed. "Why kill him when we can profit?" he suggested. The others hesitated, then nodded. They hauled Joseph from the pit, his face streaked with dirt and tears, and sold him for 20 pieces of silver. The traders' ropes bit into his wrists as they led him away. Joseph looked back, his brothers' silhouettes fading against the sunset, their betrayal a wound deeper than any pit. As Joseph vanished into the unknown, what thoughts raced through his mind? Could he ever forgive such treachery? The answer lies ahead. Don't miss what happens next. The journey to Egypt was a blur of heat and despair. Joseph stumbled behind the caravan, his wrists raw from the ropes, his coat stripped away, a symbol of his lost identity. The traders bartered in guttural tones, their words foreign to his ears. Around him, the desert stretched endlessly, a barren mirror to the emptiness within. He was no longer a favored son, but a commodity, sold for less than a shepherd's wage. The sting of betrayal gnawed at him. His own brothers, his flesh and blood, had cast him out. Egypt loomed ahead, its sands giving way to the lush Nile Delta. The air buzzed with life, merchants shouting, boats gliding along the river, the scent of bread and fish wafting through the streets. Joseph was sold again, this time to Potiphar, a high-ranking official in Pharaoh's court. His new master's estate was a world apart, towering palms, gleaming stone, servants scurrying like ants. Potiphar, stern and calculating, eyed Joseph with interest. "This one's strong," he said. "Put him to work." Joseph's days became a rhythm of labor, hauling water, tending livestock, scrubbing floors. Yet something set him apart. His hands moved with purpose, his eyes held a quiet resilience. Was it faith? A lingering hope that God hadn't abandoned him? The Bible says the Lord was with Joseph, and it showed. Potiphar noticed, entrusting him with more. First the household stores, then the keys to his wealth. Servants whispered about the Hebrew slave who prospered in a foreign land. But beneath his success, Joseph wrestled with his pain. At night, alone in his quarters, he'd stare at the flickering lamp, memories clawing at him. Reuben's hesitation, Judah's cold bargain, the pit's suffocating walls. How could he forgive them? Anger burned, yet a small voice whispered of purpose, of a God who turned ashes into beauty. Could that be true, even now? Joseph's rise was just beginning, but so was his test. What happens when trust is offered? Again, only to be shattered? Stay tuned for the next chapter of this gripping tale. Asterisk life in Potiphar's house settled into a strange rhythm for Joseph. The clatter of dishes, the hum of servants, the rustle of papyrus as he managed accounts, all became familiar. He was no longer just a slave. He was the overseer, trusted with the estate's every detail. Potiphar, pleased with the profits, barely interfered, his stern face softening with rare approval. Joseph's diligence shone, a testament to the favor of God resting on him. Servants marveled. How did this foreigner thrive where others faltered? But peace was fragile. Potiphar's wife, a woman of striking beauty and restless eyes, began to watch Joseph. Her gaze lingered too long, her voice carried a honeyed edge. She was used to commanding attention, her husband often absent on Pharaoh's business. One day, as Joseph tallied grain in the storeroom, she appeared, her robe trailing like a shadow. "You're more than a slave," she purred, stepping closer. "Stay with me." Her intent was clear, her offer a snare wrapped in flattery. Joseph froze, his heart pounding. Temptation dangled before him. Power, comfort, revenge against a world that had wronged him. Yet his faith anchored him. "How could I sin against God and my master?" he said, voice steady but firm. He turned to leave, but she grabbed his cloak, desperation flashing in her eyes. He slipped free, fleeing the room, leaving the garment in her grasp. Her face twisted with fury. Rejection was a wound she wouldn't forgive. Alone again, Joseph wrestled with new questions. He'd escaped the pit, survived betrayal, and now faced a test of integrity. Why did God allow this? Was faithfulness worth the cost? He didn't yet know that her scorn would soon unravel everything he'd built. For in that moment, her scream echoed through the halls, a lie taking shape that would plunge him deeper into darkness. What happens when innocence is accused? Can Joseph hold on to hope when the world turns against him again? Find out in the next chapter. The air in Potiphar's house turned thick with deceit. His wife, clutching Joseph's cloak, wove a tale of seduction and betrayal, her voice trembling with feigned outrage. "This Hebrew slave tried to dishonor me," she cried, tears glistening. Potiphar stormed in, his face a mask of fury. Joseph's protests were drowned by her accusations, his loyalty repaid with chains. Dragged from the estate, he was thrown into Pharaoh's prison, a dank, stone labyrinth where hope withered. The dungeon was a world of shadows. Rats skittered across the floor, the air reeked of damp earth and despair. Chained beside thieves and rebels, Joseph felt the weight of injustice crush him. His hands, once trusted with wealth, now gripped cold iron. Memories flooded back, the pit, the traitors, his brother's sneers. Was this his reward for faithfulness? At night, he whispered prayers into the darkness, clinging to a God who seemed silent. Yet even here, God's presence lingered. The warden, a gruff man with weary eyes, noticed Joseph's calm amid the chaos. Tasks piled up, rationing food, settling disputes, and Joseph handled them with quiet skill. Soon, the warden placed the prison under his care, the clank of keys a strange echo of his days with Potiphar. Prisoners began to whisper. The Hebrew brought order to this hell. Among them were two new arrivals, Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, fallen from grace. One night, their troubled faces betrayed restless dreams. Joseph, stirred by compassion, approached. "Tell me," he said softly. The cupbearer spoke of a vine bearing 3 clusters, wine flowing into Pharaoh's cup. The baker described 3 baskets of bread, birds tearing them apart. Joseph listened, his spirit quickening. These weren't random visions. God was speaking again. What do these dreams foretell? Will they lift Joseph from the depths or bury him deeper? The answers unfold next. Don't miss it. Asterisk in the flickering torchlight of the prison, Joseph sat with the cupbearer and baker, their dreams hanging heavy in the air. He closed his eyes, seeking the God who'd once filled his own nights with visions. The words came, clear and certain. To the cupbearer, 3 branches mean 3 days. You'll be restored to Pharaoh's side, pouring his wine again. The man's face lit with hope. To the baker, 3 baskets mean 3 days too, but birds will eat your flesh as you hang. The baker paled, his fate sealed in Joseph's. Quiet voice. Days later, it unfolded as he'd said. The cupbearer, reinstated, breathed free air, while the baker's lifeless body swayed in the wind. Joseph watched from his cell, a bitter irony twisting within. He'd asked the cupbearer, "Remember me when you're free. Plead my case. I've done no wrong." The man nodded, gratitude in his eyes. But as he walked away, Joseph's plea faded from his mind, lost to the bustle of Pharaoh's court. 2 years crept by, each day a stone added to Joseph's burden. In the silence, he wrestled with despair. The pit, Potiphar's house. Now this. Why did faithfulness lead to chains? Yet he couldn't shake the dreams, the sense that God was weaving something greater. He traced patterns in the dust, recalling his boyhood visions of stars and sheaves. Were they a cruel jest or a promise yet unmet? The prison walls offered no answers, only echoes of his prayers. Outside, Egypt thrived under the sun, oblivious to the dreamer in its depths. But a storm was brewing in Pharaoh's palace, dreams of a different kind, ones that would ripple through time. Joseph didn't know it yet, but his moment was near. The God who spoke in shadows was about to call him into the light. What happens when Pharaoh himself dreams? Will Joseph's gift finally free him, or is this just another false hope? Stay with us for the next chapter. 2 years had etched lines into Joseph's face, his youthful glow dimmed by prison's gloom. He managed the inmates with steady hands, but his heart carried a quiet ache. Then, one morning, the clang of keys broke the monotony. Guards seized him, their grip firm but urgent. "Pharaoh summons you," they barked. Shaved and clad in fresh linen, Joseph stepped from the dungeon, blinking against the sun. The cupbearer had remembered, too late, yet just in time. Pharaoh's palace gleamed with opulence. Marble pillars, golden statues, the murmur of courtiers. The king sat on his throne, his brow furrowed. "I've dreamed," he said, voice heavy. 7 fat cows devoured by 7 gaunt ones. 7 plump ears of grain swallowed by 7 withered ones. My wise men are baffled. Can you unravel this? Joseph stood before him, a slave turned seer, his past a distant echo. He listened, the dreams stirring something divine within. God has shown you what's coming, he said. 7 years of plenty will fill Egypt's barns, followed by 7 years of famine so fierce it'll erase the abundance. Prepare now, store grain, appoint an overseer. His words carried weight, a calm authority that silenced the room. Pharaoh's eyes narrowed, then softened. Who better than you, he declared. Rings slid onto Joseph's fingers, a chain of gold draped around his neck. At 30, he was no longer a prisoner, but Egypt's second in command. The transition was dizzying. Chariots bore him through cheering crowds. His name, Zaphanath-Paneah, proclaimed across the land. He oversaw granaries, planned irrigation, his mind a whirlwind of strategy and faith. Yet at night, alone in his chambers, he wondered, why this rise? Was it for Egypt, or something more personal, a reunion he couldn't yet fathom? Joseph stands atop a nation, but his past lingers. What happens when famine reaches beyond Egypt's borders? The next chapter holds the key. Don't miss it. Years of plenty bathed Egypt in golden harvests. Fields burst with wheat, orchards groaned with fruit, and Joseph's granaries towered like mountains. His foresight saved a nation, his name whispered in awe. But as the 7th year waned, the skies hardened, the Nile shrank, and the land cracked under a merciless sun. Famine sank its claws into Egypt and beyond, a specter that drove men to desperation. From distant lands, they came, hollow-eyed, begging for grain Joseph had preserved. In Canaan, Jacob's household felt the hunger too. His sons, Joseph's brothers, gathered around a dwindling fire, their faces gaunt. Egypt has food, Jacob said, voice raspy. Take silver, go, and buy what we need. 10 of them set out, leaving young Benjamin behind, a fragile remnant of Rachel's line. Too precious to risk. Dust swirled as they trekked south, their past a buried secret they thought lost to time. They arrived in Memphis, bowing before the governor, Joseph himself, though they didn't know it. Clad in fine linen, his Hebrew features masked by power. He recognized them instantly. Reuben's stooped shoulders, Judah's sharp jaw. The faces of betrayal stared back. His heart thudded, a storm of rage and longing surging within. He spoke through an interpreter, voice cold. Where are you from? Canaan, they stammered. We seek grain. His eyes bored into them, testing their words. Suspicion laced his tone. Spies, he accused, watching them flinch. They protested, spilling their story. We're 12 brothers, sons of one man. One is no more, the youngest stays home. Joseph's breath caught at the lie. One is no more, yet. He pressed on. Prove it. Bring your youngest brother, or you'll not leave alive. He jailed them 3 days, their fear a mirror to his own in the pit. Releasing them, he kept Simeon bound, a hostage to ensure their return. What drives Joseph to test them? Is it vengeance, or a deeper yearning? The stakes rise in the next chapter. Stay tuned. The brothers trudged back to Canaan, their donkeys laden with grain, but their spirits heavy. Simeon's absence gnawed at them, a chain linking them to Egypt's enigmatic governor. At home, Jacob raged when they relayed the demand. Bring, Benjamin. You've bereaved me already. Joseph gone. Now Simeon, and you take him too? His voice cracked, a father's grief raw after years. But hunger tightened its grip, and necessity won. Take gifts, he relented, and double the silver. May God soften that man's heart. The journey back was somber, Benjamin's presence a fragile thread. At Joseph's court, they bowed again, trembling as he eyed the boy, his full brother, Rachel's last son. Memories flooded him, her gentle voice, their shared laughter, now a distant echo. He hid his tears, retreating to compose himself. Returning, he ordered a feast, seating them by age, a detail that unnerved them. How does he know? Levi whispered. Food piled high, yet Benjamin's portion dwarfed theirs, a silent test of their envy. As they ate, Joseph's gaze flickered, between warmth and calculation. He spoke through his interpreter, probing their story, their father's health. Their answers were cautious, unaware they dined with the brother they'd sold. When the meal ended, he dismissed them to rest, but not before a secret command. Fill their sacks with grain and silver. and plant my silver cup in the youngest's bag." His steward nodded. The trap set. They left at dawn, relief loosening their shoulders. But miles out, hoofbeats thundered behind them. Joseph's men overtook them, faces grim. "Why repay good with evil?" the steward demanded. "My master's cup is gone." The brothers froze, their protest loud. "We'd never steal. Search us. If it's found, that man dies." Their confidence crumbled as the cup gleamed from Benjamin's sack. Caught in a web of their own making, what will become of them? Has Joseph's plan sealed their fate? Or his own? Find out next. Panic seized the brothers as the steward held up the silver cup, its gleam and noose tightening around them. "Thieves," he accused, and they tore their robes in despair, the echo of their past sins ringing loud. Dragged back to Joseph's court, they fell before him, faces pressed to the stone. "What have you done?" he thundered, his voice ablaze. Judah, trembling, spoke first. "We're guilty before God. Punish us all." But Joseph's eyes fixed on Benjamin. "Only the one with the cup stays. The rest go." The words pierced Judah like a spear. Benjamin, the last link to Rachel, enslaved? He saw Jacob's face, the grief that would kill him, and something broke within. Stepping forward, he poured out his heart. "My lord, our father is old, his life bound to this boy. We lost another son years ago. If Benjamin doesn't return, he'll die of sorrow. I pledged my life for him. Take me instead. I can't bear his pain again." His voice shook, tears streaking his dust-caked face. Joseph stood motionless, the room silent but for Judah's ragged breaths. Beneath his stern facade, a tempest raged. This wasn't the Judah who'd sold him, the cold, calculating brother who'd bartered his life for silver. This was a man humbled, sacrificing himself for love. The test had revealed their hearts, and forgiveness, long buried, stirred within him. Could he let go of the past? Was this the moment God had shaped through years of pain? He dismissed his servants, the click of the door sealing them in. The brothers watched, confused, as his composure cracked. What came next would change everything. A revelation poised to shatter their world and heal his own. What will Joseph do with this power? Over his brothers? Is forgiveness possible after so much hurt? The answer unfolds next. Don't miss it. Alone with his brothers, Joseph's resolve crumbled. His chest heaved, a sob breaking free as he tore away the mask of the governor. "I am Joseph," he cried, voice raw and trembling. The room spun, the brothers' faces draining of color. Reuben staggered back, Judah's mouth gaped, terror seizing them. The brother they'd betrayed, presumed dead, stood alive, ruler of Egypt, their fate in his hands. "Is my father still alive?" Joseph pressed, stepping closer, his eyes searching theirs. They couldn't speak, rooted by fear and shame. Years of guilt crashed over them. The pit, the silver, the lies to Jacob. Joseph saw it all in their silence and softened. "Don't be afraid," he said, voice gentling. "You meant to harm me, but God meant it for good, to save lives, to bring us here." He wept openly now, tears of relief and release, the weight of decades lifting. He beckoned them near, and they stumbled forward, awestruck. He embraced Benjamin first, the boy's tears soaking his robe, then the others. One by one. "I've forgiven you," he whispered, the words a balm to wounds they'd all carried. The brothers wept too, a flood of remorse and gratitude mingling. Joseph's forgiveness wasn't weakness but a triumph, a choice forged in pits, prisons, and palaces. He recounted his journey, tracing God's hand through every trial, his voice steady with wonder. "Bring our father here," he urged. "Tell him I live, that Egypt is ours to share." The brothers nodded, dazed, as he loaded them with gifts, wagons, grain, garments, proof of his mercy. As they prepared to leave, Joseph lingered, gazing at them. Forgiveness had set him free, but a new chapter loomed. Reunion with Jacob. How will Jacob react to this miracle? Can a family broken by betrayal truly heal? Stay with us for the next chapter. The brothers rode from Egypt, their wagons groaning with bounty, their hearts a tangle of awe and dread. Joseph's forgiveness defied reason. How could he embrace those who'd sold him? Judah gripped the reins, replaying his words. God meant it for good. Reuben murmured prayers, grappling with grace they didn't deserve. Benjamin, wide-eyed, clutched a robe from Joseph, a token of a brother he'd barely known. The journey to Canaan was swift, urgency driving them to Jacob. At home, the old man sat by his tent, his sight dim, his spirit frail. The brothers approached, hesitant. "Father," Judah began, "Joseph is alive. He's ruler of Egypt and bids us join him." Jacob's head snapped up, disbelief etching his face. "Alive," he rasped. They spilled the tale, betrayal unveiled, forgiveness offered, wagons as proof. He touched the gifts, trembling, then wept, joy and sorrow colliding. "My son lives. I'll see him before I die." The caravan south was a pilgrimage of hope. Jacob leaned on his staff, the miles blurring as memories surfaced, Joseph's dreams, his coat, the decades of mourning. Had God truly turned lost to life? Egypt's border loomed, and there stood Joseph, tall, regal, tears glistening. Father and son embraced, time melting away. "I can die in peace now," Jacob whispered. But Joseph held him tighter, unwilling to let go. The family settled in Goshen, a fertile haven gifted by Pharaoh. Tents rose, laughter echoed, a fractured clan reborn. Yet Joseph knew this wasn't the end. Forgiveness had rebuilt them, but its ripples would stretch beyond their days. What does this reunion teach us about letting go? Is forgiveness the end or a beginning? The reflections deepen next. Keep watching. Goshen bloomed with life as Jacob's clan took root. Shepherds tended flocks, children raced through fields, and Joseph's visits brought grain and stories. He sat with Jacob under starlit skies, recounting pits and palaces, his father nodding with quiet awe. "God's ways are mysterious," Jacob said, his voice a thread of wisdom forged by years. The brothers, once shadowed by guilt, worked alongside Joseph, their bond mending with each shared task. But healing wasn't instant. Reuben avoided Joseph's gaze at times, the pit's echo lingering. Judah wrestled with shame, offering extra labor as penance. Joseph saw their struggle and met it with patience, his forgiveness a steady flame. He'd learned its cost, nights of anger, prayers for strength, and its reward, a family no longer defined by betrayal. Spiritual threads wove through their days. They offered sacrifices, thanking God for redemption. Pharaoh blessed their presence, Egypt thriving under Joseph's hand. Yet he pondered deeper truths. Forgiveness wasn't erasing the past, but releasing its hold, a lesson etched in his soul. As Jacob's years waned, Joseph cherished each moment, knowing this peace was a gift. What sustains forgiveness when old wounds whisper? How does faith shape a restored life? The answers lie ahead. Stay with us. Jacob's death cast a shadow over Goshen. Joseph buried him with honor, weeping as the patriarch's blessings echoed. "God will bring you out of this land." The brothers mourned, too, but fear crept in. Without Jacob's presence, would Joseph's mercy hold? They approached him, bowing low. "Father told us to seek your forgiveness again." They lied, trembling. "Will you punish us now?" Joseph's heart sank. They still doubted him. "Don't fear," he said, lifting them up. "Am I God to judge you? What you did, he turned for good." His voice carried no bitterness, only grace. He'd let go long ago, not because their sin was small, but because God's purpose was greater. The brothers exhaled, relief washing over them, and their trust deepened. Reflecting alone, Joseph traced his scars, physical and unseen. Forgiveness, he realized, was a daily choice, a surrender to something bigger. Philosophers might call it noble, Scripture called it divine. "Vengeance is mine," God said, and Joseph had lived that truth, finding freedom in release. Why is forgiveness so hard to trust? What power lies in choosing it again and again? The next chapter explores this. Don't miss it. Joseph's tale is a cornerstone, but the Bible brims with forgiveness. Consider the prodigal son, welcomed home by a father's open arms despite his squandered past. Or Jesus, forgiving from the cross. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." These stories echo Joseph's. Hurt met with mercy, brokenness with restoration. Each reveals a truth. Forgiveness isn't human instinct, but a divine gift. Joseph lived this, his life a testament to faith's triumph over pain. He didn't erase his brother's deeds, but reframed them through God's lens. Philosophically, it's a paradox. Letting go strengthens us. Spiritually, it's obedience to a higher call. His story asks, can we do the same? What do these tales teach us about our own hurts? How do they connect to Joseph's journey? Stay tuned for more. The parable of the prodigal son unfolds like a mirror to Joseph's grace. A young man demanded his inheritance, fleeing to squander it on fleeting pleasures. Famine struck, and he fed pigs, longing for their slop. Humbled, he returned, expecting wrath. Instead, his father ran to him, robes flying, and embraced him. No questions, only love. The older brother fumed, but the father's mercy stood firm. Like Joseph, the father chose forgiveness over justice, seeing beyond the hurt. Both stories whisper, love redeems what resentment destroys. Joseph's brothers returned too, and he ran to them in spirit, offering life. What drives such mercy? Can we mirror it in our lives? The reflections grow next. Keep watching. Jesus taught forgiveness as a cornerstone of faith. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. He lived it, pardoning sinners and dying for them. Joseph prefigured this, his mercy a shadow of the cross. Both show forgiveness as trust in God's justice, not ours. It's not weakness but power, freeing us from bitterness chains. Joseph's choice spared lives. Jesus saved souls. The Bible insists, to receive mercy, we must give it. A hard truth, but a healing one. How does faith fuel forgiveness? What happens when we cling to grudges instead? Stay with us. Forgiveness falters when hurt runs deep. Anger feels righteous, a shield against pain. Joseph faced this in the pit, the prison, the palace. Each blow a reason to harden. Yet he broke free, not by denying the hurt, but by entrusting it to God. Psychologists say grudges poison us. Scripture says forgiveness heals. Love your enemies, Jesus urged, a command Joseph embodied. It's a battle, pride versus peace. Joseph won it daily, proving we can too. What holds us back from letting go? How do we start? The next chapter digs deeper. Don't miss it. Forgiveness mends what betrayal breaks. Joseph's family thrived because he released his pain, turning scars into bridges. Studies show forgiving lowers stress, lifts spirits. Science echoes faith. The Bible promises peace to those who pardon, a balm for the soul. Joseph found this, his heart whole despite the past. It's not forgetting, it's freeing. A gift to ourselves as much as others. How does forgiveness heal us? What might it mend in your life? Stay tuned for more. Joseph's story offers steps. Feel the hurt, seek God's strength, choose mercy, repeat. It's messy, imperfect, but possible. Start small, forgive a slight, then a wound. Prayer helps, faith sustains. He showed it's not a moment, but a journey, one we're called to walk. Today, who needs your grace? Like Joseph, you might save more than you know. How can we apply this daily? What's the first step for you? The finale awaits. Joseph died at 110, his legacy not power but forgiveness. He blessed his brother's descendants, entrusting them to God's promise. His story asks, will we cling to hurt or release it? It's our choice, to heal, to grow, to live free. Forgiveness isn't easy, but it's worth it, a testament to faith's quiet strength. If this journey moved you, please like, subscribe, and share your story in the comments. How have you wrestled with forgiveness? Your thoughts inspire us. Thanks for watching to the end. You're why we tell these tales.